Mesdames, you are welcome. Before I give the floor to Professor Felipe for the opening introduction, help me welcome our guests and experts together. Got us here to share talks and ideas about the topic importance of MILCities municipality election in Africa. Yeah, around this virtual table, we have Professor Felipe Chiba Ortiz, the international co-leader of MILCities initiative from UNESCO Mile Alliance Brazil. He is a well-known speaker, writer, and professor of communication and MILCities program at the University of Sao Paulo. And he is the representative of MILCities at UNESCO Paris and travel all over the world to spread these projects and support countries to integrate MILCities as a key development tool in their countries. Professor Felipe, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank
you. Please, excuse me.
Yeah. We have also here Dr. Ma Barashi from Sudan. She is an associate professor of communication, media and creative industry department at United Arab Emirates University. She lives in Sudan. She is a researcher. Also, you are welcome, Dr. Ma.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we have our key guest, Mrs. Rachel Fisher from South Africa. Mrs. Rachel is our key guest for today's meeting. She is a lecturer, a researcher, and activist, ethics and democracy expert. She is a co-founder of Créé Consulting. Mrs. Rachel, you are welcome.
Merci beaucoup. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you also. So, before we give the floor to Mrs. Rachel, I will give the floor to Professor Felipe for his opening introduction. Thank you, Professor Felipe. You have the floor.
Thank you, my dear friend, Professor Emmanuel Komikonako. It's a real honor to be here in this moment, this important moment. Greetings for all. I am a Professor Felipe Chivas Ortiz, co-leader of the MILCities initiative of our Media and Information Literacy Cities from UNESCO. With these opening words, I want to welcome everyone, especially, of course, our speaker today, Mrs. Rachel Fisher, Professor Rachel Fisher, and of course, the Professor PID, Dr. Maha Basri, both members of UNESCO Mil Alliance, professors and intellectuals and activists who contribute in their countries in practice the transformation of urban space in Africa into MILCities. It is a true honor to receive them today. But what are the MILCities or MILCities? There are an evolution of smart cities, educative cities, sustainable cities, creative cities, and other city paradigms advocated by UN and UNESCO and other international organisms. But that focus on the participation of all, and especially the common citizen, and all diversities such as gender, age, ethnicity, religion, language, immigrant, among others. Build media and information literacy cities in Africa is necessary democracy. But to build democracy is necessary elections. It's essential elections. In the election must be all the inhabitants of the cities. And recently, I had the opportunity to be in Mozambique, in the cities of Quilimani and Maputo, advising the city hall of Quilimani to become a MILCity. Begin in this African city we saw the real importance of elections to build democracy and true MILCities. Precisely, this will be on the topic they will address today, our conversation, our debate, the need for everyone to participate in the elections, and especially for the 5 innovation agents to build democratic societies and cities. These agents are policymakers, educators, technology-based companies, and others, artists, and ordinary or simply citizens. But let's not delay any longer. Let's hear my initial words, because we got here a real experts today. Many thanks to Professor Rachel Fisher, to Professor Maha Basri, and of course, our dear friend, Professor and colleague, Emmanuel Komikonako, founder of PAFEME and African Canada MILCities coordinator. Be very welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Felipe, for your introduction. It is a big pleasure for us to hear from you, and we will give the floor to Mrs. Rachel for her speech. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel and Felipe, for your introductory words. Likewise, I would like to say hello and welcome to everybody part of this panel, as well as all the viewers that will watch this live and then once it's recorded and made available. Now, as rightly indicated, we all have our titles and our fields in which we specialize in. And being within media and information literacy and wearing all our different hats, one of the most important ones, particularly within this theme of today, is being an activist and raising awareness, taking our research and putting it on a platform where it speaks to the heart of who we are within a democracy, within our various countries. And this is why having media and information literacy discussions are central, not only for municipal elections, but also local, provincial and national elections, not only in Africa, but across the globe. We have a multitude of elections taking place annually, and in particularly this year and next year and going on. So not only for 2023 is this important, but as long as we have got civil rights and standing up for our democracies, this should continue. Now, if we come back to media and information literacy, I trust we will all agree that media and information literacy functions as an enabling factor across all sectors of society. It's not an add-on. It's not something that you go through school, primary, secondary, you go and study, you go and work, and then, oh, maybe I'm going to take literacy and become literate. No, it is, you need literacy in order to be able to learn and to engage with learning material, to engage with information and communication technologies, and particularly with media and information literacy. How do we understand, consume media, contribute to it? And of course, with elections, we all know how we are flooded by so much rhetoric and claims from political parties and underinterested, such as independent candidates, wanting us to give our votes to them. So how then do we distinguish and differentiate, and what is good, quality and accurate information, and what are those that could be more in the scope of disinformation that tries to manipulate the voters based on opinion or facts that are adjusted according to the needs and the whims of those in power. Together with agreeing how media and information literacy is an enabling factor across all societies, we must also acknowledge that we are currently facing a democratic crisis in our countries that do have democracies, whether it is full, hybrid, or flawed, according to the Economist's Democracy Index. We see these crises in manners relating to a loss in trust in our governments, whether it's a loss in trust in the executive or judiciary or the legislatures, And once again, we need to consider how citizens, perhaps if you do not work and study within the space of politics necessarily, we tend to lump everything of the government under one. So if we have our local councils or municipalities or provincial management structures, we see them all part as the government. And if that is the ruling party, then they are the ones that's in charge of this. We can also see our parliaments maybe as a function of government. But even though this is not the case, our judiciary is not necessarily part of the government. This is why we speak about the balance and the separation of powers, where those three entities, the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, must be separated, but they must also balance each other to make sure that not one of those parties have got more sway and maybe manipulate the others for their own devices. So if there's a loss of trust in these institutions, we see it particularly within a decreased voter turnout when it comes to elections. So once again, either if it's local, municipal, provincial, or national, our rates of turnout take or go down. So we see decreased levels of registration, and we see also decreased levels of those going to the ballots and vote. As an example, in South Africa, our local government elections back in 2021 saw the lowest voter turnout since the dawn of our democracy in 1994. So approximately 26 of our citizens registered to vote. That is half of the eligible figure of those that can vote. Of this 26, less than half actually went to the polling stations. So that is less than 42% of citizens going to vote of those registered. So we are very much concerned if we look at 2024, that will be our next national and provincial elections, because if this trend continues, we will see lower turnout. And this we see in 2024 as the most important election South Africa will face. Now, this links with disillusionment within government, disillusionment in our formal structures, and then also further polarization between extreme left, extreme right political parties and their various campaigns against each other and with each other. So this is why it's extremely important for media and information literacy, because if this information is made available and distributed across multiple layers of the media, how do citizens know what it is they are receiving is accurate and of good quality? Media and information literacy must then underscore what I would almost visualize as a pyramid, three components that are essential to achieve good and quality elections within Africa, but also elsewhere. These we can remember according to 3 Ps that I will indicate as the processes. Let us go with the electoral processes. Now, these can be, for example, in South Africa, we have our Independent Electoral Commission, and they make sure that systems are put into place to ensure that elections occur within the countries without any corrupt or security or other practices coming out that could bring the integrity of the elections into question. Now, in this period, we see different phases. We see pre-election phase, where information must be made available as to the processes. What must you do as a voter? Do you register? Where's your closest voting stations? What do you do on the day? Do you take your information or identity document with? What is required when you go and vote? We also see information preceding the election day from political parties, their manifestos and campaigns. On election day, information must be made available. And what we normally see in the media after the votes have been cast, when these elections are being counted. Now, for those of you that have been following the recent elections in Nigeria, there were massive concerns raised in the media as to the integrity of this election. This was also due to the massive amount or the high number of citizens, but also the many number of polling stations available, but particularly the delay in the results being made available. So between the tallying of the votes, how they were collected, disaggregated, and then made available to the media, it wasn't sure, are these being held back on purpose, whether there's been any manipulation, or are there concerns somewhere in the electoral life cycle? So if this electoral life cycle is not handled with integrity, it does raise serious concerns. The other P on the triangle, I would state, are the political parties or the political considerations, whether it's political parties registered or independent candidates, whichever it may be. These political parties, and in line with legislation, have their own manifestos. They have got their own posters that they put out to try and get voters to engage with them, to go and make their marks in the ballot box. But if we look at the legislation behind it all in South Africa and in many other countries, most countries, we have an electoral act. I don't know if anybody within your respective countries and regions that you are situated, if you studied and tried to read your electoral act. So not only are these very long documents, they are extremely a high level of legalese, it's extremely complex, and it alienates the majority of citizens that wish to engage with this content. So crucial to our democracies and partaking in elections, if the grounding legislation and framework is already inaccessible to citizens, and then they have potentially disillusionment with politics and government, what are the chances that they would participate as active citizens within this ecosystem? And then I would like to come back to the third point then of my triangle, and that is participation. Now, participation has got so many variables. It connects with us as citizens wanting to go, having the desire to go and vote, but also to see our civic duty and responsibilities to be active citizens. Now, if you are no longer interested, or you feel perhaps, well, you know, I don't want to vote for the majority party, but I don't see any opposition, I don't agree with their values or their manifestos, then who do you go and vote for? And many just turn away. So a big role that media and information literacy can play across our societies is to look at these 3 points between processes, the politics and political parties and participation, and how can we package more easily to understand and more appealing information that could start getting citizens from a younger age to become more involved and interested within these processes. So on this matter, I would like to play a short video, if at all possible, and this speaks to political or public participation. This video, the organization that I represent, the Organization Undoing Tax Abuse in South Africa, is a civil society organization, and we monitor how government utilizes public funds. And one of this does speak to elections and how elections are managed. Now, we felt, once again, it's so important to get citizens. And if we speak of MILCities, we need to consider the citizens, right, within these cities. And how do we grab their attention? So if I can share my screen.
Yeah, try.
Emmanuel, perhaps?
You don't have access?
No.
Oh, why? Okay. I play it. Okay, do we see? Okay.
People of South Africa, your journey has been long and hard. You stood up for freedom and equality for all. This is your hard-earned democracy. This is your constitution that protects you empowers you and makes it the law for people in government to serve you, to ensure you get service delivery, access to electricity, running water, safe neighborhoods and schools, access to decent public health care, and justice before the law. That's right. They work for you. You're the boss. So act like a boss. Take back your power. Protect your democracy. How? Stand up. Stand together. Hold people in government accountable. Be a part of the electoral process. Vote. Be the boss. Be the change.
Thank you so much, Professor, for playing that. And we will make the link available. It is a YouTube link, and you'll see it's accompanied by sound as well. Now, even though this speaks to South Africa and South Africa's citizens, it is applicable to citizens across the globe. In 2024, we have approximately 20 African countries engaging in some level of election, whether it is local, municipal, provincial, or national. Globally, we have got 42 countries that plan to have elections across the globe. Of course, one of them is the United States of America, which has gotten particular media attention recently. But if we look at then these 42, what are the messages that are being broadcast to citizens? We are dealing with a knowledge economy. So with this video as an example, it's 1 minute long. We also have a 30-second long video and or a 10-second, I don't want to say long, but a 10-second short video, because we realized that who's going to watch something even of a minute? With TikTok and YouTube Shorts, the predominant of our citizens want something that's short and snappy, else they're going to scroll past it and they might not even take in the content. So we have to think of different ways to appeal to citizens and to engage within these particular processes. That is a role that the cities can then play, because in a recent study conducted by the Independent Electoral Commission in South Africa and the Human Rights Science Research Council, we have seen of the 5 platforms through which voter education takes place, social media is at the lowest. But if we look at the number or the figures of citizens, the youth and those eligible to vote, the majority of them are on social media. In this study, radio ranked the highest. So in South Africa and in many African countries, radio and local radio stations have got the broadest and the highest reach. So it's very important then to collaborate with these radio stations and to evaluate and work together with researchers, local community members, universities, policymakers in such campaigns to prepare the citizens. Secondly, were posters. Posters were the second most platform through which education took place. Now, I don't know about you all, but in South Africa, posters, I mean, they're not very big. It's got the face of the representative. It says, vote for us, normally accompanied by one big message, you know, we will change the nation, we will improve the economy, we will fix all your problems, we will stop corruption. Promises are being made. But once the votes have been cast, how much is actually in effect going to change? Then that is followed by television, which is very low figure, newspapers, informal social networks and our communities, and then right at the bottom, we've got social media. But once again, we see the trends of social media across the board in other sectors are increasing. But we have to then consider, if we want to make such campaigns and education available and educative information for citizens, we will have to ensure that appropriate media and information and digital literacy training is taking place. So in general, when we look at balloting and voter education across the board, we need to consider then the literacy campaigns that are taking place. But together with this, we must ensure electoral integrity. Now, electoral integrity is only achieved when electoral procedures meet established norms and standards at each of the stages of an electoral cycle. So this could be the processes, the parties, the participation, but also the pre-election, current election phases, and post-election phases. And that is why, not only for municipal elections, but across the board, whether it's provincial or national, is to ensure that electoral integrity comes closer to media and information literacy. And in so doing, we can strengthen citizen awareness, participation, and hopefully turn the tide of our democracies that are in a crisis. I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rachel, for your presentation. It was very interesting. Yeah, you have invited us to know more the role of, or the link between democracy and MILCities or MIL in our societies. And I have written some notes down. That information must be available as a process for the democracy and vote development in our countries. And it must be accurate information, and people, citizens must be trained to know their role and to be informed so they can be engaged to vote and play the role of citizens. So democracy must be strong. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this kind of thoughts and information with us today. I will let the floor to Professor Felipe and Dr. Ma to add, to contribute, because we are here to share together our information. You have the floor. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your kindness. Of course, Rachel, for your knowledge, for share with us your knowledge. In my opinion, is very, very important in this moment for the elections in Africa and other parts of the world. The presence of AI, you know, AI, Chat GPT 4, and the fusion in the future, this toilet and the importance of this toilet is incrementally. In my opinion, this factor is will be change the elections in the world. And in dear Rachel and Maha, I want to know your opinion about this.
Yeah.
Rachel,
Yes.
you want to go first? Because I had a question for you, and then I'll piggyback off of what you say.
Yes, I mean, of course, ChatGPT, it is everywhere. And what is very interesting and then very concerning of ChatGPT, amongst countless reasons why it's concerning, is how it screens current information that is available and packages it in a way that most likely speaks to the needs of the person that is requesting that information. So how can it systematically then adjust and even provide manipulated or disinformation to the person that is requesting it? Now, a couple of years ago, I mean, it's not even that long ago, we sat with Cambridge Analytica that already engaged it in manipulation processes of voters. So the strength of Cambridge Analytica, or the concerning aspect of it, was that it didn't target necessarily those on either far left or far right. It targeted those in the center that were undecided as to whether they would be voting, and to nudge them in whichever direction to get more votes for a right-led party, or to encourage them to go and vote. And this is how elections can be manipulated. What ChatGPT then does is, if it gives out a response, or one thinks that it's a quick solution in your research process, if you do not then go and verify that information, then in many instances, you have then inaccurate information that will have a knock-on effect. Interestingly enough, there is some evidence that points that unless you ask ChatGPT for its references, where it got its information from, you do not necessarily know where it gleaned that. And then when you do ask for it what those references are, and you go and verify against those references, these are not legitimate sources. And this is also very concerning. What will then be the knock-on effect in elections? It's those in positions of power that know that they could utilize it as a means of manipulation. And what I do feel what MIL can do, and this is something that's really good with the UNESCO Information for All program and its priorities, is for researchers and activists such as ourselves to set out certain indicators or guiding questions that could be used very effectively and easily to, I want to say, jar citizens to reconsider. Until now, so Turnitin, I don't know who else utilizes Turnitin as an academic integrity platform. We normally don't say it's a plagiarism checker, it's a similarity checker. And it's up to you, the user or the lecturer, to go and screen, is this similarity or plagiarism, and not to penalize the student or the person that made the submission. So the responsibility falls back onto you. But now, luckily, Turnitin has started embedding ChatGPT into its systems. Yet I don't know how it can improve. Just to clarify, it is embedded ways to check whether ChatGPT has been utilized. How that will happen exactly cannot be said. But once again, the more the system is fed, the more it can adjust what it is distributing. And so we are just increasing echo chambers. And this is very concerning in the power struggles within elections. We don't want echo chambers to increase. But once again, with the knowledge economy and or attention economy, and with the youth becoming more eligible for voting, they're becoming more susceptible to misinformation around voting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can add something to what Rachel was alluding to a few minutes ago. And I think we've been having these conversations for a while now. ChatGPT didn't make its entry into the world of AI until like this November. This is when it became such a big deal. We need to understand that all this AI stuff, they're tools. At the end of the day, for example, in another 6 months, we might have something new. The gist of all of this is to ensure that your populace has the skills to critically analyze whatever type of information is being thrown at them. That's the most important thing, because each and every day we are going to have some kind of new innovation when it comes to this technology. But it is how people use these innovations, and if they can critically analyze the information that is being presented to them. This is what the role of media and information literacy is. It's to educate, it's to give people the skills. Then it's on you as a voter or a citizen to check the information. And I think this is part of, or this is one of the biggest problems that we have around the world, especially in developing countries like the ones we have in our African context, whereby people don't necessarily have the skills. The technology might be available to a few, but we need to be training, or we need to be teaching. I mean, you cannot go to the university to learn, or you don't go to school to learn how to like media and information literacy. It is part of the curriculum. It is something that is embedded, that grows with you as you mature, as you become a citizen who's able to go to the polling station and, vote. So our responsibility as academics, as researchers, and even the responsibility of politicians and political entities is to ensure that you have an actively engaged population that is able to analyze information in whatever type of packaging it's in. Like if it comes to you on the internet, or if it's word of mouth. As Rachel said, social media is the least used in South Africa, which I found really, really interesting. And I think it speaks to the context. And that's what we need to be looking at. What is the context that we're talking about? So that's my 2 cents here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maya, for your contribution. It is very important. We need effectively to train people, citizens, to have competencies to act. And I can also add that it is very important. In the past, I have worked in France in an organization we call Ville Internet. Ville Internet is the first organization helping municipalities, government in France to develop local citizens' democracy in France. So every mayor must develop in his country, in his government, internet information program. So people must know how to use this information to communicate with mayors, to propose plan to develop their countries and to participate in their local development. And I have worked for 1 year with this organization to share this information in Africa. But as we know, our continent, people don't like the lights. Sometimes they say that when citizens know where their role, they can be the opposite for their development and their plan. So they have arrested this project, but we know today it is very important to return back to the ground, the root of information as a tool to develop our countries. Even though in our villages today, people must know how to manage information because everyone has his own phone. In my country, in my village, there is no internet connection. There is no electricity, but you can see meet one person with 2 or 3 iPhone. How they use it? They can travel to for 1 hour to charge their telephone, and they use it. I recognize many of my people, my senior brothers, who are on Facebook, but they don't have internet in their village. The city is very, very far from the village, but they are using it. So it is important, as you have said, to train people, even though they are in village, in small cities, to know their role through the use of information. Thank you very much for this sharing. Professor Felipe, Mrs. Rachel, if you have something to add, the floor is open.
Yeah. But please, ladies first, Miss Rachel.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm quite curious, Maha, I know that you've prepared a couple of slides on this. So it'd be very interesting to see what you have prepared, because once again, all of this is an ecosystemic approach towards solving it, but we also realize there are so many problems within this ecosystem. So we need to consider, how do we go about this?
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, I'll take you quickly through just examples because we're always talking in the abstract, but we don't really know what's happening on the ground in Africa. And I think it's really important to put this into context. So if I may get credentials, Emmanuel, to go ahead and share my.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
Guys.
You don't have the permission to.
No,
Oh. Oh, yeah. How can I do it now? Okay.
it should be under view, I believe.
Yeah. On the view.
Yes.
Okay.
Show manage participants.
Okay. Okay. Please try.
Okay, now I can. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
So quickly, I'm just going to take you, through some examples, and what we need to understand when we talk about, elections and literacy information, media information literacy all over the world, but especially in an African context, is that we're talking about rights and understanding rights. What right do you have as a citizen, as a voter? So that's why we say that media and information literacy, and especially cities that are set to do that, can play an important role in having citizens understand their rights and therefore going to the polling stations and voting. The cities will serve as dissemination centers for information. They will also train people or give people the skills, promoting the idea of media information literacy among citizens. For example, Emmanuel just a few minutes ago said that people in his village don't have access to electricity. And this is across the board in many places in Africa. Yet they might have access to the latest technology. They're not going to understand this idea of media and information literacy. We cannot put it in the abstract. It needs to be packaged in a way whereby people can tangibly see how it affects their daily lives. So there are, media and information literacy in cities enable people to go out and participate, or one of the most significant advantages of media and information literacy cities is their ability to promote citizen participation in the democratic process. And we all know that most countries in Africa, of the 56, not even a fourth are democratic states, but we're transitioning. And as I said, voting in elections or the democratic process, the starting point is knowing your rights and how to actually go about fighting for those rights. So in many African countries, because of the state of governance, voter apathy is a significant challenge that we have to overcome. Because in most cases, voters think that, elections are not legitimate and the electoral process is really broken. So MILCities address this challenge by providing citizens with knowledge and skills, actual knowledge and skills that are necessary to participate actively in the democratic process. So a very good example of this is in Accra, Ghana. The city has implemented several initiatives to promote, MIL. As I said, not in the abstract sense, but whereby people actually go about doing and learning. So this includes the establishment of community radio stations. And this goes back to what Rachel was saying, that radio really plays an important role in information dissemination, and the introduction, embedding media and information literacy programs in the educational curricula. So, for example, they have a citizens platform called Créé, which allows citizens to report issues that affect their own community. So it's in play here. You actually use your skills to report, maybe you have an unpaved road that you want the government to pay attention to. Maybe you have flooding that's going on. So by providing citizens with a voice, it's all about voice and agency and a platform to engage with elected officials. That's his first starting point. Accra has empowered its citizens to participate actively in the democratic process. So as I said, it's a starting point. It might not be 100% perfect, but at least people know that, hey, this is my right, and I can go about fighting for my rights by doing, A, B, C, and D. The other, idea behind media information literacy, or the other advantage of media information literacy, is the idea of transparency and accountability for government. MILCities provide citizens with the tools to hold their elected officials accountable for their actions. I didn't vote for you just for you to have a seat. I voted for you to do things for me. You work for me, I don't work for you. So MILCities address this challenge by promoting transparency and accountability in the government. So good example is Johannesburg in South Africa. There's several initiatives that promote transparency and accountability in the government. This includes the establishment of an online portal that allows citizens to access information about government activities. Knowing, okay, is again a first step to actually, knowing what's going on is a first step to knowing what you should be fighting for. And this also has introduced training programs for journalists who are the liaison between the citizenry and the government and civil society organizations to promote investigative journalism, a very important role that they play in connecting people and giving people the information that they need. So these initiatives have led to increased transparency in government and hopefully a reduction in corruption. Innovation and development. When people are economically independent, okay, they can talk about democracy. If you don't have food on your plate, you're not going to talk about media information literacy. You're going to be wanting to feed your kids and your family. But when you have that economic grounding, when you have development going on, this is really important to you participating, becoming an active participant in the civic process. So by providing citizens with access to information and the skills to use effectively in MILCities, this provides innovation and creates new opportunities, especially for the young, for economic growth. By 2030, okay, Africa is going to have the youngest world population. So we really have, it's both a challenge for us, but at the same time, it's a huge opportunity for the continent. A good example of this is Kigali in Rwanda. They have the K-Lab, which has provided really, useful partnerships or training and resources for young people who are interested in startups, as well as a program called Smart Kigali that uses technology to improve city services and promote economic development. These initiatives have been successful in promoting the innovation and economic growth, not only in the city of Kigali, but in Rwanda as a whole. And again, as I said, if you are economically grounded, okay, you know what your rights are. The next step is to become an active civic participant in the democratic process. Social inclusion and equality, which is also very, very important, and media and information literacy plays a huge role in this. In many African countries, we have marginalized communities that don't have, or they often lack access to information and are excluded from the processes, from both political and development processes. They don't have voice, they don't have agency. MIL addresses this challenge by providing these groups or communities with access to information and understanding and empowering them to participate actively in the democratic process. When you understand, when you have access to information, you know what your rights are. You can actually have the agency and have the path to go out and fight for those rights. Example is Tunis in Tunisia. They have had several successful initiatives that promote peace and stability. These initiatives include the establishment of community radio stations. Radio plays a huge role in Africa and in many other developing countries around the world. These radio stations promote tolerance and understanding among the different ethnic groups and communities, as well as the introduction of training programs for journalists and civil society organizations to promote conflict-sensitive reporting. And if you were following recently, they have had a huge brouhaha going on in Tunisia regarding African immigrants, and they don't want African immigrants, that they are not African. So these radio stations actually had programs that talked about tolerance and, talked about an African unity that needs to be taking place in Tunisia. So the initiatives have been successful in promoting peace and stability in Tunis, enabling citizens to participate in the democratic process and to access basic services without fear of violence and instability. You know who you are, you know what your rights are. Nairobi, Kenya is another example. They have had several initiatives to promote social inclusion and reduce inequality, especially in the marginalized neighborhoods or on the outskirts of Nairobi, where they have introduced media information literacy education or curriculum in the schools. This is really important because Nairobi especially has a huge issue with these marginalized groups that live in the outskirts of Nairobi, and where the poverty level is just really, really huge. Disparities are huge in Kenya. So in conclusion, MILCities set the stage, or media and information literacy sets the stage for the democratic process. So you have to do all these things first before you ask people to go to the polling stations and vote. By promoting, citizen participation, by having transparency and accountability, so people actually do believe in their, entities and the political process, by having innovation in economic development, which grounds people, because when you have that, then you can start talking about your rights, by being included, by knowing that you have voice and agency. This also leads to peace and stability. So these cities, when we have these four factors, we're providing citizens with the tools and the knowledge base that is necessary for them to participate actively in a democratic process. Yes, we have a long ways to go, but we have to start somewhere. And I think, as I said, in the midst of my presentation, even though it's a challenge, we're going to have the youngest population around the world, but we have great opportunities. And I think that we are going to overcome if we, build from the ground up. So media and information literacy remains the main, one of the main factors that can lead or that can usher in democracy and its processes in the African continent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Mara, for your speech. It is very, very interesting as the first presentation presented by Mrs. Rachel. In your presentation, you focus on many, many things, and I will highlight the keynotes. So, MILCities play a vital role in election in Africa to promote participation, transparency, accountability, innovation, economical and social inclusion, peace and stability. These are the key notes, the key word, the key dot is we need to play, MILCities need to play to let people, citizens, know the role of citizens so they can be the builders of democracy for the people, by the people, for the country, for our villages. You have said everything, and I will pass the floor to Professor Felipe to contribute, to Mrs. Rachel to add. Thank you so much.
Let me tell some words, some ideas to my. I am really satisfied for the presentation of Mrs. Rachel, for the slides and presentation of Professor Dr. Mahabasri, and of course your words and your support, dear friend Emmanuel Komikonako. I want to say some ideas about this session, about this important session. In my opinion, is very important in this discussion. The picture, the general picture of MIL and MILCities is very important too. In this reflection, the local and specific culture and identity of each country in Africa. Maha, the professor Dr. Maha Basri, presented this picture, and for us is very important. Oh, please, Dr. Maha Basri, share with us your slides, please. Your slides are very clear and important guidelines for us.
I will share them with you, no problem.
And the reflection is, in my opinion, this reflection and this line is very important to the future of Africa. We are very worried with the future of Africa because we need, in my opinion, this continent have a real richness and a real power, but we need this power, bring this power to the present and the future too. And the elections is central for this. Democratic elections, election with transparency, election with ethics. This is very important. MILCities and MIL approach are excellent instruments for this. We need to expand this approach. We need to share this approach with politics or policymakers. We need to share this approach in the universities. We need to share this approach with the people, but these factors or fake agents of innovation are essentials to develop the cities and the society in Africa. But that's my opinion. And the last idea is very important to the elections: the cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is very important today because without cybersecurity, we haven't trust in the elections. This point is very important, and in everywhere we discuss this point too: the cybersecurity and the importance for the elections and the transparency of course. But that's my little ideas. I am very happy to share and discuss with the excellent experts to be here. And of course, we need your ideas, your support, your presence, and your practical action for the transformation of Africa. Thank you so much, and we grow together, of course.
Thank you, Professor Felipe, for your contribution. And we have to give the floor to Mrs. Rachel for her final word. After Dr. Ma will give us her final word and we conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I've got so many questions, Maha, and that is quite good, even cognizant then of our time, because it shows you how many gaps, but also opportunities there are to keep on with this discussion. What I particularly liked of your presentation, Maha, is showing, and I agree, how the youth in Africa will have the largest youth complement by 2030, but we also have so many challenges. But one thing that we really have as Africans is our scope for innovation. Our problem solving is immense because we need to deal with realities of basic needs and necessities. And we cannot just wait for our governments or international aid to filter that down to us. But secondly, what I really like what you were mentioning about these innovations and processes already happening, but then also from bottom up in terms of citizens and getting more active participation, not necessarily explicitly said. And what I'm realizing now in our own experience, when you mentioned City of Johannesburg, we have this massive issue of coalition governments. So we don't just have a majority party, we have a couple that have entered coalitions, and the power struggles are intense. And we regularly do speak about lifelong learning within media and information literacy. And I think that there is much scope for us in collaboration with local decision makers, politicians, researchers, not just to look at citizens that need to vote, but to collaborate with our governments. Because I think, yes, we know that these are learned people that do into the field of politics, but I think there's something lacking in terms of media and information literacy and awareness in this cohort that fill these positions. And then, instead of having the normal rhetoric and propaganda and our critique maybe against these institutions, to work in collaboration with them. And that, I think, would definitely also strengthen awareness around elections and voting. So I think, I'd be quite curious to see how can we explore this and look for it going forward, because it's definitely a more positive, enabling and empowering approach towards achieving media and information literacy in cities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Rachel. Dr. Ma, you have the floor. Thank you.
My final words, again, they go back to many questions I had to ask Rachel, but I'll do that privately because we're short on time here. But what struck me, and what is really, really interesting, because she's talking from the South African context, and my lens and perspective is always, my research is focused on Sudan, is, if we look at social media, for example, from, let's say, a US perspective, it's used a lot in elections, especially, with the advent of TikTok and all the other platforms. But Rachel was saying that in South Africa, it is other modes of dissemination that play a larger role. We are seeing the same things in Sudan. We don't necessarily have elections at this point in time, but for change, for social change, for mobilization, we are seeing, because we are still a very collectivist society, where word of mouth and your social networks are very, very important. There is, if I can call it that, a two-tier type of communication model that is happening, whereby, yes, you might have one person or a couple of people who have access to new media, maybe WhatsApp or, the platforms, but then they take the message and it's disseminated by word of mouth to others, which really plays a huge role in how people are informed when it comes to politics and social issues. So what I'd like to end by saying is that even though, and we did say this at the beginning, all of us said that each country in Africa has its own context, but there are also lots of similarities that we need to look at. It's case studies. Media and information literacy does not exist in a vacuum. And I think we need to look, especially as a continent, at each other's experiences. And that will help us then shape our own context for what media information literacy programs, or what to do, or how to get people to become more involved in social change and in the political process. So if I can end by saying it is more, if we can go global, and that is have a global kind of view, but shape it to the local context. And the starting point is our neighbors, our brothers and sisters within the continent itself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ma, for this clarification, this contribution. It is very important, exactly. In my point of view, as you have said, as we have shared, we need to go first to local and to global. And in global context to local context, it depends on the capacity of each country and each government, each local government, and each local municipalities. As I have said, when I work with this organization, which is the first organization in France, they used to work with municipalities, with small villages, small countries to know how they use information and what are their needs according to their level of people. Are these people intellectual or farmers? They adapt strategies according to their need and develop programs and tools to help them access to information to be the part of the solution. And you have shared many ideas, many information about how we can use MILCT programs, initiative to empower our countries, to empower our citizens. And it is very important. We need to go far with Professor Felipe, with others, with many experts. We need to mobilize mayors, students, schools, universities, researchers to be part of this great project. I have traveled to Africa, in Togo, in Ivory Coast, Mali, and I have identified that people are in need to know what we call MILCT or LMIL. They don't have any program in their curricula. So, Professor Felipe, you know to move UNESCO to give us many support so we can travel all over Africa to let them know that MILCT is very important for the development of democracy, development of local accessibility to information. Thank you so much for what you have shared today. I give the floor for the final conclusion. Professor Felipe, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody. Of course, thank you, Professor Emmanuel Komikonako. I am really happy and very satisfied for the presentations of Rachel, the Professor Rachel Fisher, and the Professor Maha Basri. In my opinion, these two presentations are complementary. These presentations focus the MILCities approach in the context of elections in Africa and speak about the future and the best future for Africa. We need that. We believe in that. Of course, we need to build this future together. We need the possibility to grow together with this approach. MIL approach is MIL and MILCity approach are a real light for us, because this approach meet the technology, but meets to ethics vision, a vision with respect with diversities, and these points are fundamental now, and the elections is the instrument to visualize a new forms and a new ideas and practice for Africa. Let me tell one more things. It's very important too. in my opinions, in these presentations, one word: balance. Balance of cultures, balance of the local approach and the general approach, or MILCities approach. Is necessary this balance, but with this balance, we can do a real project or a real change. We need Africa. But that's my final words. I want to say thanks again to everybody for your presence, for your ideas, for your time. Of course, we need your efforts to grow together. Thank you so much again, and go ahead, people. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor Felipe. Thank you, Mrs. Fisher, for your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ma, for everything you have brought here to share together with us. It is our pleasure to continue working together, grow together, and build this country together. Thank you so much. Have a great day, a great night where you are. Thank you.